Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the HumCast. My name is Luca, also known as the guy who can never fucking get into a guest call. And today with me on the HumCast we have Heavenly.
Hello.
Wexter.
Yo!
Lido.
Good evening, everyone.
And Brent, aka the 42 Gamer.
No, we were gonna drop that.
Oh, we're gonna drop that?
Yeah.
Brent.
Dang it, Brent!
Brent.
Hi.
And today we've decided that our topic is basically going to be kind of an unconventional one. We're going to be talking about anime figurines and kind of the social implications of having one and the influence of it.
The kind of etiquettes around it and whatnot.
What is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what makes you a normal person and what makes you a freaking weirdo.
Yeah, basically, I mean, there's a lot of variations, but I seem to see a lot of people who have a large amount tend to be regarded as more strange. So my kind of personal rule on it has always been just one on display is enough. As long as you just have one that's visible, I don't think too many people will say anything. But when you start getting into the 3 and more that are on display for people to see, and I use on display very specifically because you can have some hidden away in your closet to alternate. But it's so long as
you're just hiding in the closet, eh?
Right, exactly. It's away
see.
and hidden, so no one can say anything about it.
Then I'm officially in the weirdo category for you, Heavenly.
Well, you live alone, so
Right.
so you can hide them away in a closet if someone comes
Exactly.
by, so.
That's the beauty of it.
I could, but I don't. But yeah.
It's
Okay, so apparently according to Heavenly Standards, Lee is weirdo. My standards are kind of more lax. I'm guessing I'm more like, so long as they're not like extremely weird, like if you have like a freaking high school DxD figure or something, I'm guessing like 10 is basically pretty acceptable in my standards. So long as they're not like perverted or etchy or anything.
right.
Yeah, like with me, I'm kind of the same way. Like maybe about 10 or 15 are pretty good. But if you have anything like that one Kirino statue that has like the squeezable chest, that's I mean that's a little.
Oh, man. See, this is one thing that, in the Kirino figure is actually one of the things that I really laugh to myself a lot about. I'm like, sometimes these perverted figures you see online, you just sometimes need to think to yourself, she's 15! 15!
And that is,
Hey,
that is one
technically-
of the ages of consent in Japan. So,
Yeah.
You know,
Isn't
So-
it actually 13, not 15?
It is.
yeah, yeah. So in Japan, she is of legal age. Prefecture-wise, there's probably different rules, but
Right.
Yeah.
just keep that in mind.
Well, I mean,
Just remember that.
I think that definitely has a place in the figurine talk on the type of figure you have can also play a role on how the impressions are given. So if you have one of those really weird naked dress-up ones, odds are you're going to be regarded as a lot more weird if you have just kind of a standard standing model, which is what I tend to lean for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to leave like freaking dress up, undressing ones like out in the open anyway, if you don't expect to be regarded strangely, then there's something wrong with you.
I think it also depends, like, where you place them in your house. Like, I mean, if you have them in your bedroom and you're living with your family members or a roommate, I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, if you have, like, a game room, like a
Yeah.
game room, it's probably okay to have figures up. Like, I've got Luger and Mila from Tales of Zillia 1 and 2 because it came with the collector's edition of the game. So I actually have them up on display. Except for right now, they're actually right next to me right now, just for reasons. No, it's actually because I brought a couple of my quote-unquote figures, using finger quotes here, just so I can kind of compare what I have versus what I don't kind of have. But I mean, like, if you have them on a display in a game room or an entertainment room, a lot of people aren't really gonna care too much because they're like, oh, it's an entertainment room, you're supposed to kind of make it kind of fun, a little bit more exciting, so it doesn't really matter. As long as it's not, like, really, really perverted, I don't think a lot of people are gonna mind it too much in a game room or entertainment room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and that is definitely another factor on placement. It's funny how there are so many things that can change the kind of the acceptability of it, and one of those things is like if you do a game room and make it a very nerdy theme, then it turns into something that would normally be strange if you had them laying around your desk. That's something that's fairly cool.
Yeah.
Because it's the theme of the room. You probably also have weird Mario posters on the wall and whatnot.
Like, I mean, for example, in my entertainment room when I was growing up as a kid, like, we actually had, like, Star Trek posters and, like, Star Wars posters up. So, I mean, and these were, like, laminated, like, really nice, professional-looking posters. And, like, a lot of people didn't really care or mind. They're like, oh, cool, Star Trek. But, I mean, as you get older as well, it really depends on the acceptability level. It's kind of like when you're a teenager. You're allowed to have, like, really, what would be the word?
You're allowed to watch anime.
Yeah, like you're allowed to watch anime and stuff.
You're allowed to be a man-child.
A little bit, yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, when you kind of reach an adult age, it'd be kind of weird if you were to bring somebody over and it's like your bedroom, and you'd have like giant perverted posters up on your wall. I think a lot of girls would just kind of look at you and go,
Okay.
"Really?"
Yeah.
So you're one of those people, eh?
Yeah. Well, compared to like, let's say it's like a garage or like a sports room, like a lot of people would consider that more socially acceptable.
The best way is to get all your contacts on conventions.
That would definitely be one way to completely eradicate this issue.
Yes.
Everyone you know must be from a convention.
Yeah. Like, I mean,
Everyone who's in your house has to be has to own at least 7 figures in order for it to be accepted.
like,
Yes.
yeah, like when we go to Hummingbird, like there's a few people who post their figures up, and most of the time we're like, oh, cool, that's totally awesome. I wish I had that. It's really cool. But that's mostly because we understand the hobby. We understand like
We're not normal.
We're speaking from an insider's perspective and not an outsider's.
Yeah.
That's the big difference.
Yeah.
And even then, we still like look weirdly at people who have like overly perverted like figurines.
Like,
Because
I mean,
that's not something you just show to everybody. If you want to keep that to yourself and like frickin' hold it close to you while you're sleeping, hey, that's your own prerogative, but we don't want to know about it.
Yeah. Actually, but the reason why I think we're kind of doing this figurine talk is actually probably because of my local game store recently. I went in.
Soccer figure, damn it.
I'm sorry, she got sold. I'm sorry, buddy. It's okay, Luke. I was actually thinking of buying her and sending her to you, but unfortunately, she was sold by the time I went back. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay, man.
There
We'll
are
talk
more
about
in the
that
world.
more in the next episode.
So what happened was I went in and he got like this new case and he bought a ton of figures, and he just put them in the case and he's just like, these are cheap, they're gonna sell. And I was looking through the case and I'm like, wow. Some of them were actually pretty cool. There was a Sakura, I think there was like a few Haruhis, a Yuki. There were a couple cool ones. I think he had like maybe a Nindoroid or two in there.
Damn.
But I was looking to the bottom shelf and there was like this very erotic looking figure, and I'm just like, oh man, you gotta have quite the cojones to walk into the store, go to the case and go, I want that one.
Yeah, I had to have as big of cojones as someone who walked up to a GameStop store and bought Conception 2.
You mean me?
You gotta be the kind of man who's willing to walk into Walmart and buy 50 Shades of Grey with no problem.
Barnes & Noble, actually, would probably be...
Only if the register person is female.
Yeah.
But with that said, I mean, yeah, that is a part of it. It's all the super etchiness which is surrounded around the figures, which we may view as strange because from a Western perspective, it's a bit more unusual to have this over-sexualization of things.
Well, I mean, as I told you, one of my aunts is Japanese, and even in Japan, it's not really looked at as socially acceptable to kind of have those out on display. Like, I mean, there are socially acceptable things you can have out on display, like figure-wise and manga-wise and anime-wise. But the more erotic figures, even there, aren't totally socially acceptable either, just to have out in your living room. Or
the reason for that is because the dominant age group of Japan is of older people which obviously as such they're going to be far more traditional than the younger audiences.
Yeah. I mean, I collect many little nerdy knickknacks. The amiibo craze is probably one of the biggest, I think you could call, figure craze of recent memory.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I would probably agree. Nintendo definitely is making a good buck with that.
Yeah.
I don't completely support amiibos, but I can tell that they are very popular.
Like, I mean, like Brent probably understands what I'm talking about here when I say, like, it's really cool that I actually own a Marth amiibo, and it's so awesome to actually have it because, like, whenever in North America are you going to get an opportunity to buy, like, a little Marth figure, like this little statue?
I
Yeah,
think there's an Nendoroid Marth figure, isn't there?
there probably is. I'm not
Nendoroid
100%
does
for
game
sure.
still a lot, so, you know.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Like, well, personally, I'm not, like, in the amiibo craze, because I kind of think they're a little bit pricey, and for what they do with your games, I don't really think it's worth buying. That's just kind of what I think.
They do stuff with your game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you can create your own CPU in Smash Brothers, and you can, like, teach them tactics for fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That you basically teach them to play like you,
Interesting.
so that the board can assimilate us all into the collective.
Like, I mean, as I said, like, amiibo is probably the biggest recent figurine craze that you could call mainstream. But I think at the same time, there's also a certain level of acceptance of it because it's game related. I think game related figures tend to be more acceptable than anime related figures, and I think that's kind of interesting if you think about it.
I don't really. I kind of disagree with the fact that's interesting because even now, like, anime is less socially acceptable than gaming. So figure-wise, it basically is very parallel to it. So
It depends on your surroundings, though. I personally study Japanese, and I work in a bookstore that sells manga and anime and figurines and all this stuff. And for me, I have a lot of friends that are into anime and manga, and I can just, like, talk about it way more openly. And gaming is less of a focus. Like, I don't know that many gamers, and mostly when they game, it's like the Dota stuff. So,
Dota.
yeah. So,
That's basically very specific to what kind of groups you hang around.
yeah.
Yeah, in a lot of ways that is true, because the type of people that I'm usually around are kind of in the complete opposite, just in general, because there's this no nerdy, there's this no anime, there's no gaming. Like, typically the people I'm around completely cut all of that out.
That when I'm actually thinking about it, that's probably why your view on figurines is probably so different. Like, the one on display thing is because you've dealt with people who are so different and not nerdy that you probably just think it's better to tone it down and keep it in the closet rather than blurring it out.
Yeah, it may play a role there. I mean, I know that's just the way I've looked at it. Like, having one on my desk, would I imagine being okay, so long as it's fairly conservative and not super sexualized or etchy or anything like that. Nothing that would go
So long as it's not
overboard.
like a Rias from High School DxD figurine or something.
Right, so long as it
Or
has,
Quinn's
like,
Blade.
a moderately sized chest and at least fairly well clothed, I guess.
Fairly well clothed, I guess. Heavenly 2015.
If we were to think about figures in general, I think a lot of people in the anime community really do have this certain, like, there's like this threshold on what kind of figures a lot of them buy. Like, Nendoroids are insanely popular.
Yeah.
Like,
And
I mean,
Figmas.
Figmas
Yeah,
as
Figmas
well.
are also very popular. They're also
Yeah.
pretty pricey.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
From the looks of it.
I have 2 Figmas, so...
I have one.
I want to Fate Stay Night Figma so badly.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, like, Nendoroids are very popular because they're like these little chibi characters. They're so easy to have multiple of those on display, and nobody's gonna even bat an eyelash at them. They're gonna be like, "Oh, that's kind of cool. That's really nifty." And I mean,
They're
if
also
you do,
cheap.
and I mean, even if you do, let's say, bring a girl home and she's not necessarily into the whole anime hobby, or game hobby, they could look at it and go, oh, that is really cute. It's kind of adorable, because it's very much similar to like little like statues or little kind of glass statues that have been around for decades.
Eons.
I personally have 2 Figmas and 2 Nendroids, and they are also more, well, the Nendroids especially, they don't have like any chest proportions or stuff like this. They are like the gigantic head and then the tiny body.
Yeah,
but also
they keep
the
it very
Figma
kid-friendly.
Yeah, but also the Figmas aren't this focused on like having a gigantic chest or stuff. They are also more like reasonable proportioned, and if I compare
They're
it
more
to,
accurate, correct?
yeah, if I compare it to other fixed figures that don't really move, they have like way more when it comes to chest and other stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like you said earlier about, I think Figmas, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Them being expensive, I think that also plays another role into the whole figurine thing. And it's not so much about the display of it, but the factor in obtaining it. Because I've looked at figures, and some of them are upwards of $100. You buy 3 of them, and you're $300 in, and it can get really expensive really fast.
It's basically a label of enthusiast. If you're like an anime fan and anime enthusiast, figures are probably a very good way to differentiate yourself.
Right.
Especially the collector's editions that come out. I have a magical snow version Miku, Nendroid. That was like $120. So just a single figure.
That is a pretty penny.
I mean, even like smaller figures, like as I said, I collect small amiibos. Mostly I try to hunt down the characters I really like. I've got I think I have about 5 of them now, and each one was like what, $12-13 a pop. So I mean, I've already invested probably close to $70 into that.
You got that little Mac amiibo?
Unfortunately, I haven't been able to hunt him down. He's rare. But at the same time, like even the smaller, cheaper kind of nerd or geek figurines, like the what are they called? Like those little vinyl bobbleheads, like the little pop ones. What are they called?
Oh crap! What are they?
What are they called? Hold up. Let me just give me 1 second.
I have no idea.
They're actually just called kind of pop. Yeah, they're actually called pop. And I mean, I've got a few of those. I mean, the price really does stack up after a while, because I've got like 4 of those, and it's like I've already spent close to $40-50. So around at that point, you might as well buy one of the bigger, more expensive Figmas, because, well, you've already spent.
You're just getting something that looks far nicer.
Yeah,
at that point.
But those add up too. Like with my store, I recently was on in German it's called Leipziger Buchmesse, which is the biggest book fair in Germany, and I worked there, and so I also obviously bought stuff there, and I spent close to €400 there in just a weekend. Like, so
that is
to put that into perspective for people who don't understand the price of a euro, that is close to $600.
Not
that sounds
really,
way
like,
too high.
Close to
around. It's probably less than that.
$480 maybe.
It's
Let's round it up to 500
So half a
USD.
grand, basically.
Yeah. So
that's pretty expensive.
Yeah. I mean, the price definitely does add up, and I think that's half of the hobby, because, like, I mean, if I look at my manga shelf and I look at it, and I've got close to probably 4 shelves of just manga. And I've probably spent close to, oh my goodness, if I were to think about it, $400-500 on just manga. It's insane.
I've seen worse. I have a friend who has an entire wall of manga.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does add up, and I mean that's taking into account the average price of about $10 per manga, and this does not include stuff like Berserk, which can go up to like $15 or $20 a volume, or stuff like Monster or that kind of thing. Yeah,
Imports are also a very big thing.
Yeah, like, I mean, I know, Lee, you were talking about this the other day, that you cannot read German manga. You have to import the English or Japanese one.
I can read them, and I also have a lot of German manga because it's way cheaper. But I just like the English versions more, way more.
Lee is lucky because he can get Oyasumi Pun Pun. Maybe can't.
And the world God only knows that lucky.
Yeah. They didn't even sell that well. Like, we had the 19th volume on the book fair, and I think we sold like 2 in 4 days.
Nice.
So
Yeah, the world God only knows is definitely a bit more of a niche series because of the content, for sure. And I mean, bringing this to the figure talk itself, I mean, it really depends, because I look at my Pathfinder books, and a lot of people go, why would you buy that? That is ridiculous. You spent $70 on like this big, thick game book. Why are you not just going to go play an RPG game if you want to go play an RPG game? Why spend that kind of money? Well, it also has to do with the fact that it's the only way I'm ever going to be able to experience Pathfinder is if I own the book and I open it up with a table of friends and we all play the game. And sometimes for figure collectors, it's a case of it's the only way they could get a tangible piece of the anime they love into their room, into their life, into bringing it into real life.
But I mean, that's part of it, sure, but don't you consider collecting Blu-rays or DVDs or even the manga as a form of getting a tangible version?
If I can pull this back to the Amiibo talk, the reason why they initially became so popular outside of the rarity of stuff like Marth, Villager, and those figures is because it's the only way for a lot of North Americans for them to ever get like a piece of Fire Emblem sitting on their shelf that's not a game. Like, it's Marth. He's from the game. He's pretty close to as accurate as you're ever going to get. It's the only way you could get a tangible piece of the game, of the history of the game, into the real world. And I think that's half the love of certain people when it comes to certain figures.
And with the Samus amiibo, you can also open metros in Russia. So.
Wait, what?
Oh yeah, that was a news piece a while ago. Like, somebody was able to, in a train station in Russia, someone had a Samus amiibo, and they were able to open a one of those like ticket gates to go to the train. They were able to open it with just Samus amiibo.
That's pretty impressive.
Wow.
Yeah. We'll
nice.
probably link the article in the description now that we just brought it up. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting read. Pretty funny, actually.
Also, one thing I want to mention is that like collecting figures, collecting amiibos, collecting whatever, manga, all that stuff, is also a hobby. And I personally don't have any other hobbies except for like collecting stuff. So I can afford to spend stuff on it. Like, I thought about it. It sounds like I spent way too much money on figurines, but I have a job, I live on my own, I can afford this. It's my only hobby. So if you look on the expense side of like figurine collection, it's not as bad. Yeah. Like if you had 1,000,000,001 things to do, then yeah, collecting figures would probably get really pricey really fast. Yeah.
Like, I can tell you guys right now, like, I've got a number of hobbies. Like, outside of anime, I've got gaming, I like to read comics, I enjoy computers, there's all sorts of crazy stuff I like to do. I play Pathfinder. So, I mean, to me, I have a hard time justifying the $120 figure when I could go, well, I could go buy a new Pathfinder book with that, or I could go find a very expensive retro game, or I could save up money for certain other things that I may want to do. Because I do travel to Ottawa fairly regularly. And I mean, well, as Lee just said, he doesn't really have that many other hobbies outside of collecting and anime, that kind of thing. So to him, it's a little bit easier to justify the price sometimes, because it's like, well...
Yeah.
The way it works is the further in you specialize, the easier it is to get farther within it. If you're going and doing a broad range of things, you're not going to be able to go as far in all of them as you will on focusing on one specific thing. That's the difference between you and Lee. Lee's able to focus and specialize on one specific hobby of his, while you have a whole wide array of things that you can do.
Exactly.
And as such, it's very pricey for you.
Yeah. And I mean, not to disrespect people who do buy erotic figures, but I was looking around the other day for certain characters, because when we were talking about the figure cast, I wanted to do a little bit of research first on what characters you can get in just kind of standard standing figures and the ones you could get in more erotic ones. And sometimes the erotic figures are the only ones that certain characters exist in. So to some people, they have, if they really want, let's say they love High School DxD. Probably a bad example. But
That is a horrible example.
it's a horrible example, but I know people who love that franchise for more than just the plot.
So you're talking about yourself.
No. I'm talking about a couple of people I hang out with on Skype, and
Critical.
yeah, and he's pretty much said many times the only way he can get certain characters from that series are in the erotic figure camp. So he's actually done some looking around, and some of the characters only exist that way. So to some people who enjoy certain series that are a bit more ecchi or a bit more adult, it's the only type of figure they can actually buy that's related to that series.
In a way, I agree with you.
Which is the one you put in
Yeah,
the
that's
closet.
definitely a closet one. But, like, I was looking at Grisaya, right, and looking at Yumiko figures, and the only one I could seem to find, at least, was the Bunny Girl one from the OVAs.
Of course.
Which is,
Of
like,
course.
it's kind of a waste. Snow just
Of
standing
course.
there figure? Really?
Yeah. I mean, I've looked several times because one of my favorite characters in anime is Hakua from The World God Only Knows. And when I was first found Hummingbird and I was first discovering the crazier aspects of this hobby, I was looking at them. I'm just like, well, I can only really get an Nendoroid, or I can only really get like a relatively expensive standing figure. I just want like a small little, almost like amiibo-sized figure because they tend to be cheaper. That just doesn't exist. You just can't really find that. And I mean, it
Well,
just it sucks sometimes.
One workaround for this is, one, the medium can get more popular. As such, it'll one, get more acceptable, and two, there will be a wider array of figures for you to browse and peruse. Ones from entry grade to enthusiast. But the problem with that is that while anime has been getting a lot more popular recently, it's only been flagship titles like Akame ga Kill and Attack on Titan. So I think, for the deeper aspects like figures and whatnot, it's still going to be quite a bit of time before it can actually become acceptable, even if you are an anime fan.
Yeah. It's still got a long way to go because in North America, at least, I'm not entirely sure how Europe is. Lee could probably confirm this or not. Gaming became really socially acceptable when the Wii came out. Like, even like before the Wii, there was the PS2 and the PS1, but a lot of people only really bought those as cheap DVD or CD
Or
players.
they occasionally had them.
Or for their
For those
child.
one every once in a while games.
Yeah. And when the Wii came out, and a lot of people like to disrespect the Wii, but it really was the catapult that really pushed gaming to the mainstream focus. And it's an amazing console in retrospect. Once we get past the HD rose-colored glasses. And I mean, it was a key part of making the medium mainstream. And now you could go into a Future Shop or Toys R Us or Walmart, and you could see like Master Chief figures, Amiibo, Skylanders, like all this stuff all over the place that you can actually buy that's related to your medium.
And nobody will bat an eye at you.
Nobody will care. They'll be like, oh, you're buying a Link Amiibo. That's awesome. Or, oh, man, you're actually buying that Master Chief figure? That thing is so cool. Man, that's just... how are you going to display it? Like, that kind of thing. While, let's say, anime, I just don't think it's reached that threshold yet inside of the popular culture. And I don't see it happening relatively
we've got a
anytime
good
soon.
while.
Yeah. It's gonna be far more difficult. There's not going to be really an anime that's going to be the Wii for the anime genre. Not even Attack on Titan really is that big. So, and Attack on Titan is, popularity-wise, the biggest anime to come out in years. So,
Like,
The anime is growing without a doubt. I mean, just the other day when I was training at the gym, the guy who I train with, my personal trainer, actually was like, "Hey, bro, did you see that Attack on Titan's live action trailer? It was pretty awesome." I was like, "What? Wait." Right. I was like,
Way to push
no,
it
I
even
don't know
further
what that
into the
is.
mainstream.
And it was an interesting occurrence because it was like I
Like
never
dumb.
expected to hear that from someone who, and he is a bit more on the nerdy side with gaming and stuff, but still not that deep into it, at least as far as I know.
yeah, like the cuts are definitely happening, and you're starting to get the crossing of the nerd streams. Because I mean,
Don't cross the streams.
and I mean, if you look at it, gaming and anime-related games are becoming relatively big. Like Attack on Titan for the 3DS
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
that-
a big announcement.
was hugely announced, and even a lot of gamers who've never even really watched anime or Attack on Titan are going, "That game looks awesome." And Nintendo even announced in their Nintendo Direct, "Oh yeah, you can watch the first 2 episodes of Attack on Titan on our eShop. You can just go download that right now and go watch."
Yep. And even then, like, you guys remember the announcement of Persona 5, like, freaking huge. Like, there was buzz about it for days, and that's a very anime-influenced game.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Shin Megami Tensei X Fire Emblem is a slightly
Yeah,
less
that's
big
also very
title,
similar.
but it's also received a fair bit of buzz, you could say, even in non-anime circles. Like, I've heard people talk about it just generally perusing around in town.
Yeah. Like, anime games are becoming more acceptable, probably because of things like Attack on Titan to an extent, but in a way probably because they're just so lighthearted and casual and just fun, and so they're a breath of fresh air in the oversaturated, gray dark first person shooter market that is today. But this kind of a far cry from Fears.
Yeah.
It is, and to jump back on the figures, one of the things I wanted to mention about kind of the futures of figures, so to speak, could be something like 3D printing. As it improves, it would be interesting to see if you could just download a cat design of your favorite series figures and print them out on your $300 flipping 3D printer.
Yeah.
And then
We aren't
paint them.
We haven't quite got there yet because 3D printing still requires a lot of painting skills to really
Right.
make them pop.
Yeah.
But, I mean, let's compare it to Gunpla. Gundam model kits. That is insanely popular in Japan, possibly even more than figures. Like, to the point they actually have their own conventions. And even out here in the West, you see a lot of people partaking in the hobby. Like, you go to a hobby shop, you might find a Gundam kit or two. And
Right,
it's
next
very
to all the
similar
random
to
stuff.
figurines in the sense that the only difference is you can build them.
Right, one of the things I can remember that's somewhat similar to that is, and it's a bit of a stretch, but there were Legos that came out for a period of time that were specifically made to design specific things, like a Lego battleship or a Lego pirate ship, stuff like that, where you would go through with all the Lego pieces and build up this thing. Not totally the same as, like the Gundam stuff, but it is a Western, I want to say, comparison to it.
Probably the biggest comparison that you can make between Gundam and that would probably actually be Warhammer 40K. Because if you look at the actual board game, that's basically exactly what you would do. You buy the figurines. I think a lot of them actually come pre-made, but you like painstakingly like paint them yourself and everything like that.
I personally know someone. I don't even think he can play the game. He just likes to collect the Warhammer 40k figurines.
Yeah, and just like decorate them.
Yeah,
Like,
and
yeah,
like build them and color them, and he spends like way too much time in them. But that's none of my business.
And, I mean, even to tie it back to my local game shop, as he said, when he opened up the case, I was talking to him like, yeah, like, how many have you sold? He's just like, you know what? I opened it up today. I've sold about 5 of them.
Wow.
And it's actually fairly impressive because I live on a relatively straight-laced island, And it's quite shocking sometimes to hear, like, oh, anime figures, wow, you've actually sold that many in the first day? And he goes, yeah. And I went back in the other day, and half the case that was there when, like, before I left for Ottawa was pretty much sold. Wow, that's
And
really
Sakura
impressive.
was gone with it.
Sakura's gone within a day. I mean, I think the only way anime figures are going to get acceptable in the West to the extent that gaming figures are is the anime itself needs to become a bit more mainstream.
Not just like blockbuster things, but like Attack on Titan, but like all genres, like not just action, but kind of like slice of
Right.
life as well.
Yeah. Coming to local game shop where I'm working in the anime store. Okay, I'm in the major city of Germany, so it's not really a comparison. But we had 2 Levi figurines from Attack on Titan that were each 140 euros. They were like gigantic, and I don't know. I think 1:6 scale, so they were huge. And we sold 2 of them. Like we had 2, we sold them both, and I was surprised a bit that they even sold, but they did.
Like,
And how quickly did they sell?
I think I personally sold one. I don't really know when they were put on display, but I think within like 2 weeks or so they were gone.
Wow.
So
yeah. And I mean, anime figurine collecting is still relatively a niche market, but I mean, it's kind of shocking how much it's actually even part of the mainstream if you think about it. Like, I mean, perverted figures, I don't think a lot of people are ever going to really consider those socially acceptable to have out on just display.
It's like having like a porn
Basically,
magazine
yeah.
on like your freaking desk. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that's just the prudish nature of the country. I think that's more of just a case of, dude,
Right.
keep that in your bedroom. Nobody cares. Just keep that. Nobody cares. But I mean, I think it's more of a sense of just general figurine collecting is just still a niche market, but it's still relatively popular, even in my local part of the woods.
Even with like far more westernized things, you can still see a lot of people who collect figures. Like, let's just compare Barbie dolls to figures for a second, right? You see like there are a lot of people who are like very, very big Barbie collectors. That's probably a very bad thing to compare to, but
A maybe a little bit better comparison would be something like Star Wars figures. I actually knew a guy who about, I want to say 8 years ago, I lived by him, had by definition a room full of boxes which contained Star Wars action figures. Literally, like, what you would do to pack up your house to move stuff, he had those full of Star Wars figures, the walls lined with Star Wars figures, all packaged and concealed. In retrospect, that's a little bit weird. Yeah, they were all
Yeah.
in good
in
condition,
mint condition.
but there's a huge community for that.
you have to keep them sealed to keep
Right.
their value. So
Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, definitely figure collecting in the West is definitely a very popular thing within the nerd, geeky psyche. Like, a lot of people do it. As I said, like, Amiibo is insanely popular, and some people just buy them for the little figures.
They don't even have Smash. They don't even have Wii U's.
They just buy the figures. It's
Right.
like, oh, cool, Mario. I'm gonna buy that. What? Compatible with Smash Brothers? I don't care. I just want the figure. And I mean,
Give it to little Jimmy for his 7th birthday.
yeah, it's a perfect example to what Heavenly even said, which is like people collect Star Wars figures, people collect Halo figures, people collect Marvel figures, like Marvel and DC statues and stuff. And I think the thing is that anime figures are not as socially acceptable yet because the medium isn't as socially acceptable yet, at least in the West. But it's definitely getting there. We may not get to the point where Western figure taste will impact the Japanese company, at least not anytime soon. but we'll definitely get to the point where you could go into your local hobby shop and they'll have like some of the more newer figures there and be like, oh yeah, you can buy this, that, or this.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely going to take some time for you to have more than one figure sitting on your desk and then having the rest in the closet like Heavenly. But I think so long as it doesn't get out of control and there's nothing that happens that completely detriments the acceptability of the anime medium, I think one day, maybe not anytime soon, maybe we'll get there. And I think on that note, it's already been roughly 40 minutes. I think it's about time we wrap this up.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Anybody have any final thoughts?
The final thoughts are basically don't be surprised if you have like freaking like Rias High School DxD figures or like anything perverted and get like weird looks for it if you're gonna have it in public display. In times like this, it's best to just hide that stuff away and like look at it when you're alone
Or with your friends who can appreciate them.
If
If
it
or
looks
with friends who can appreciate it.
If it looks like it will be advertised in a normal magazine, it's okay. If it looks like it will be advertised in a porn magazine, it's not okay.
Yeah, basically. So that's just my thoughts on it. It's just keep it under control. You're allowed to like what you like. If anyone overly judges you for having like a lot of anime figures that are just completely acceptable, there's like nothing perverted about them. They're just anime figures. If anyone judges you overly much for that, they're probably not worth having a healthy relationship with anyways. It's just my thoughts.
Yeah.
Just respect you for who you are and what you like.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, like final thoughts are pretty much that, and it really depends on where you place them as well. Like, I mean, if you have them on display in your entertainment room, a lot of people won't bat an eye on it. But if you have them like scattered around your house, they might
if you have like a cooking mama figurine like while you're freaking cooking at the stove, that's kind of a little bit weird right there. But
like, yeah, depending on where you place them in your house or how you have them on display, a lot of people aren't gonna overly care. But I mean, if you do have that really perverted like 3 foot tall Kirito from Ori emo figure with the squeezable boobs out in your living room, you might get a few dirty looks.
And you better not be surprised.
Yeah.
And don't put lotion and tissues next to it.
Maybe some WD-40 if you want to feel hardcore, but definitely no lotion.
All right, we should call this before it gets worse. All right, so my name's Luca. It's been the HumCast. With me today we had Lido, Brent, Heavenly, and Wex. And I think we'll see you guys pretty soon for Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works follow-up. See you guys later.
See ya.
Bye.